Hello, welcome to a presentation on advocating for your child in an educational setting. My name is Shara Verlon. I have 13 years of teaching experience and instructional coaching. I also have my master's in educational leadership and my license as a reading specialist, but most importantly, I am a mother to a child with pandas. Before she was diagnosed, I resigned as a full-time teacher and I went on a journey to figure out what was going on with my daughter. After she was diagnosed with pandas, my daughter entered kindergarten, and immediately I knew she needed extra support. This presentation is a summary of everything we learned. I'm hoping to make the process of advocating for your child in school a little bit easier by bringing this information to you. I know it's a time of turmoil, and so the less time of research you have to do is time with your family, time to work, or really honestly, time to get some sleep. Our outline today is these 8 things. First, being an advocate. What does that look like? When and how do we know to request a special education referral? Number 3, what is a 504 plan? And then what is an IEP or an individualized education plan? We'll look at what the referral process looks like along with the IEP process. I'll go through an example of just some things from my daughter's 504. And then there's several slides on accommodations and modifications for kids with pandas, PANS, or really, quite honestly, any child with some neurodiverse behaviors. So, what does it mean to be an advocate for your child? As we know, children with PANS and PANDAS are often unable to advocate for themselves. And often during our flares, regardless of age, they're barely, really able to function, yet alone communicate when something is overwhelming or too much for them. And most likely, they won't be able to do that with teachers at their school. And as we know, like kids who are maybe 13 years of age, they might be communicating like a 5-year-old during a flare. So instead, our pandas child will communicate with like avoidance or ADHD-like behaviors, the fight or flight response, or even worse. So we really have to be the ones that advocate for them because they certainly can't speak up in a traditional way to tell their teachers what's going on. So number 2, approach that teacher or team of professionals with a team approach. I really encourage you to see these educators as a team of professionals that really want the best for your child so he or she can succeed. It's really not a us versus them situation. And true success for your child is when both parties work together well. It's really a partnership. And I also have advice just to try to keep your emotions really out of this one and really stick to the facts. Number 3, be prepared to work to get what your child needs. The process of having your child's needs met can be lengthy. Sometimes it isn't, and very time consuming. Again, sometimes it's not. But when a plan is in place for your child, it's so worth everything that led up to it because you are seriously the best advocate for your child. Be confident, and you know more about your child than the rest of the team. So the referral process, we want to think about when do you decide to do a referral and how do you go about doing it? You may just have like this gut feeling that it's time to do a referral, or there may be like an uptick in behavior or increase in severity of your child's symptoms. For example, when you decide to do a referral process, there might be some signs of like their basic needs aren't being met. Maybe they're not eating at school. Maybe they're not using the bathroom. Maybe they're not drinking water. Maybe they're not going outside for recess. So those are some of those basic needs that aren't being met that they might tell you about, or the teacher may. Of course, academics are being affected. You may notice that that reading is slipping. They can do something one day and then not the next. Their frustration level during work is heightened compared to even a month ago or last year, whenever that is. You might notice that maybe the staff is calling home more, or you're getting more emails. Maybe the nurse is letting you know how they're coming down to their room quite a little bit more than normal. Okay, this is kind of a big sign. It's time. Socially, maybe they're having some social difficulties. Maybe making friends. Maybe they're constantly worried. Things like that about their friendships. So then let's go into how to do how to ask for a referral. So the first thing you need to do is you need to do a written request. You can email or you can write a letter to the teacher the principal or the school psychologist. You're going to ask for an evaluation for special education and then explain why. So why your child may need special education services in all the areas of suspected disability, like behavioral, emotional. Maybe there's some things going on with reading, or of course math or writing. My daughter had a lot of physical reasons. She was very clumsy during her flares and often hit her head while playing, and her joints really hurt. So those would be some explanations as to why we need to do a referral for special education. If you have any medical documentation, please provide those. It makes the process a little less time consuming. Maybe you have a diagnosis from your child's doctor. That would be helpful. So what is a 504 plan? So just some background information. A 504 refers to the Section 504 in the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, which prohibits discrimination of children with disabilities in school. So if your child has a physical or mental impairment that affects these things below, they will qualify for a 504 plan. Okay, so if they have any impairments that affect how they walk, breathe, eat, sleep, communicate, see, hear, or speak, read, concentrate, think, or learn, stand, bend, lift, or work. And schools are responsible to provide a free and appropriate education for all. And this 504 plan will modify their educational program, but it's within the regular classroom. To qualify for a 504 plan, the disability cannot be temporary. For example, they can't have a broken arm or broken leg and then qualify. Many children with PANDAS would fall into this category of a 504 plan, unless, of course, it's a more severe case. Most families that request a 504 will be given one if they can show their child does have a disability and that it is not temporary. Oftentimes, a caseworker will be provided and assigned, and it's pretty painless and straightforward, and you will also have a team. So now let's go into, what is an IEP? And this is an individualized education program, or an IEP. It's a written statement for a student with a disability that is developed, reviewed, and revised by a team of people, including the student's family, that outcomes an educational plan for the student. It is much more in-depth and involved than a 504 plan. Okay, so an IEP will identify a student's educational needs. It contains learning goals based on the student's needs, and it will describe the services a student will receive in order to progress towards their learning goals. So for an example of a goal that might be an IEP, it might say something like, student will show fluency in reading, in counting to 40, 80% of the time by, and then it will say a certain date. So that's an example of a learning goal that would be in an IEP. So then let's just talk about what is the difference between an IEP and a 504. So let's look again at that IEP. It's really for students with a disability who require specialized instruction. Okay, and in 504, these are for students with a disability that do not need specialized instruction. The IDEA, which stands for Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, controls the whole procedural requirements. It's very specific. Okay. IDEA also is the process and is much more involved than the 504 plan. An IEP requires documentation of measurable growth, and it's updated annually and also revisited as much as you would need it to be. So again, a 504 is for students with a disability that do not need specialized instruction. They can be within that classroom. It does still have an outline documenting specific accessibility requirements, and it's also updated annually. But as you can see, that IEP is just much more involved. Okay, so just a special note before we get into the rest of this. Assume that teachers have the best of intentions during this time, and keep an open mind. I mean, honestly, our daughter was really having a lot of physical issues that I felt impeded her ability to concentrate and learn. And I just really pushed for OT services, or occupational therapy services. And we did an IEP evaluation, and the assessment really showed it was more of a behavioral aspect than physical, which I still argue with this today, but either way, I wanted an OT showing my daughter some specific things and coming to do them with her. But really, her teacher spoke up and said it would be best from her as a classroom teacher, and that my daughter would be more comfortable probably with her, and that she would collaborate with the OT and set things up for my daughter in the classroom. And at first, I was a little closed minded right when we walked into the IEP about this. I had an idea this was going to happen, but the more we talked about it, the better it was. So, really, just walk in with an open mind. I definitely didn't during this specific meeting. Design your IEP or 504 with your child in mind. It can get kind of standard. Again, this is your child, you know them best. And so just kind of make sure that it's really designed with your child in mind. Just one little idea about this too is that there was a parent that I had heard about online and she was talking about how they had this IEP meeting, and the school had told her that the specific amount of money needed to provide an aid for their child would mean less aid time for other children, or maybe they would have to hire one less, teacher in that grade level. And that, of course, is not okay, and that's not fair ever to hear a comment like that. But either way, advocating for your child does not mean that other children are going to get anything less. They have to, as a school, they have to provide free and appropriate education for all. And so if you happen to hear something, that's just something like that, please don't let it stop you from pushing for what your child does need. Really take on a team approach. Ask the other professionals at the table to really speak up. We got a ton of information from the district nurse and the social worker. They were fantastic. And so it was really good to have them on the team. And again, the IDEA is a federal law governing special education. And having a disability does not guarantee the student will qualify under IDEA. So those are just some special notes to think about as you move forward. Okay, so let's talk about the referral process. After you request a special education evaluation, or like a referral, the school psychologist will ask to meet with you. You can expect the following to be discussed. So state the reasons you believe this child has a disability. You can give the symptoms of PANDAS. Just some examples like heightened sensory processing responses. Maybe your child has high anxiety or obsessive compulsive behaviors, irritability and moodiness, inflexibility, headaches, joint pains and shoulders, necks, or any neck, any other joint pain that they may have. Maybe your child stays ill longer than the average child. Maybe there's physical aggression or separation anxiety, panic attacks, rare maybe like hallucinations, inconsistencies related to numeracy and literacy, or maybe less persistency with academic tasks. And you can include any information about academics that you have. Of course, the teachers will too, but they'll just ask you about any assessments that you know about, and then the teachers will give information on like the district-wide assessments, any sort of teacher assessments that they do in the classroom. State assessments are like screeners. Next, they'll talk to you about functional performance. And this is really your child's everyday functioning and how it's impacted, right? So maybe it's impacted due to emotional regulation and control. Maybe they have problems with focus and concentration. Maybe family relationships and interactions. Maybe your child has some problems with ability to access like community activities. I know often we weren't able to leave our home for several months, so that's probably going to something regarding their functional performance. Maybe there's issues with self-care and regulation, sleep, feelings of wellness. Okay, so then you can give them any medical information that you have, maybe the diagnosis if you have that, the onset age, and list of symptoms, and some of those things we've already listed above there. They'll talk to you about special programs or services used to address the child's needs. Maybe receiving medical treatments for PANDAS. Maybe you already have a 504 plan. Maybe your child's been working with a school counselor. Maybe you've been getting physical therapy outside of school. Some of those kinds of things. And during this time that you're meeting with the psych, you can request assessments, specific ones. You might not know the exact assessments that they have, but you might say, can we do an assessment on how behavior affects learning? And they'll have things like that, some ideas. Okay, so the IEP process. What does an IEP evaluation really look like? So now you've kind of asked, I want you to think about this. You've asked for an evaluation. You just sat down with a psychologist, and now the team of educators will evaluate your child. You'll probably be asked to fill out a bunch of scales and assessment forms rating your child in certain areas. And then after that, everyone will collect their data, and then they'll meet as a team, which includes you. You are on that team. If an IEP route is the choice, these are the steps in the 5 steps. If it's a 504 evaluation, they've decided, the team will meet to list the educational goals and intervention strategies and who is responsible for implementing those strategies. So just some things to remember, that if the IEP team determines further evaluations decide that the child has or does not have a disability, you're involved with those. You have to give consent for additional assessments and evaluations, and those don't begin unless you are notified. You will be provided a copy of the evaluation report, and within 60 calendar days from your consent, the IEP team will meet to discuss the determination. So let's talk about what that meeting to determine if they would qualify for an IEP. So following this evaluation that we talked about before, you will then have a meeting to determine eligibility. They'll gather up the members of the team and you'll have a meeting, and they'll go over everything from all the testing, the information gathered from everyone. And to qualify for an IEP, your child has to have a disability and needs special education to make progress in school. And interestingly enough here, our daughter did not qualify for an IEP because she was really making progress at school, and since she had a 504 plan, it was showing that it was working for her. Okay. Next, your child's placement or services cannot be changed without your approval. It's, again, you're a team member. They can't be doing things without your consent. And you can request changes to the IEP if they do qualify, and you can advocate for more testing too. If you feel like, no, my child does qualify for an IEP, you can disagree and say no, and you can advocate for more testing. So here is an example of a 504. I just did some examples, but there can be a couple pages of these kinds of things. So first they'll put out an educational goal, and then they'll tell you the intervention strategies. They'll have a date to review it, and then the people responsible for implementing the strategies. So for example, our daughter was pretty anxious in the classroom, so they said an educational goal would be to decrease classroom anxiety. And how they're going to do that is they're going to always provide a quiet place to retreat to when feeling stressed. So they actually had like a calming corner that she went to, but other kids do too, and they trained everyone in the classroom how to use it, what it would look like, and then how to come back to the learning. Another goal that was in her 504 plan was to assist student comfort, so she's able to focus on learning. So they provided self-regulation options like a beanbag chair, heavy pressure if she needed it, pushing, pulling. She was able to take her shoes off. She really hated shoes and socks. And mindful breathing. And the school counselor was huge on this, and so were the classroom teachers. And a lot of the kids in her classroom benefited from this. Another educational goal example would be to promote healthy hygiene and increase student attendance. So the school nurse actually came in and encouraged proper hand washing, which was great, and they did that throughout the year. The custodian did deep cleanings of my daughter's specific classroom throughout the day. They showed her how to use Clorox wipes if she needed to for the table. I was still a little, I didn't know if I really wanted that, but whatever. And afternoon and evening was, the classrooms were really, really cleaned where she was. Okay, so let's get into, you'll hear a lot about accommodations versus modifications. So you'll probably hear those a lot, accommodations or modifications, while discussing a 504 and IEP. But it's okay if you don't know the difference, and don't let it stop you from talking about what your child needs, because in fact most teachers or some teachers don't understand the differences between these two. And the next couple of slides will give you some ideas to help your child in school. So an accommodation, these are examples of things that students will complete the same tasks as peers, but with some variation. Maybe they're given more time, maybe the setting is changed, or how the teacher presents it may be different. Modifications, on the other hand, changes are made in what the students are expected to learn based on their individual abilities. So here are some examples of accommodations. Again, they're going to have the same learning outcome as their peers. The grading is the same. The presentation timing and setting and response may be tweaked a little bit. Maybe the font size will be different. Maybe there's picture symbols, or they can produce their text orally instead of reading it, or maybe they have to listen to it themselves. Maybe they're using a scribe. There's voice-to technology, which is really cool. Maybe they're learning in a different location in the classroom. There's lots of sensory tools. They're given extended time. Maybe they'll do things at a certain time of the day because that's their best time to learn. Okay, so those are some accommodation ideas. Modifications, on the other hand, there's completely different learning outcomes as compared to their peers. The grading is different. Alternative information, a different level of skill or content. Complete alternate projects and assignments, and and they learn different material. So again, just to sum that up, accommodations do not change the construct or the ideas and theories being measured. For example, we may accommodate a child in the way an assessment is given or taken. Modifications, though, change what is being measured. Maybe instead of learning to count to 100, by the end of first grade, the child learns to count to 20. Okay, so we can get into some specific PANS and PANDAS accommodations and modifications. Here are some calming strategies that definitely can be used. I'm not going to specify whether the above is accommodation or a modification. The staff evaluating your child will know the difference. These are just ideas to consider as you look through them, and certainly not every one of these is best for your child, but some of them may be. And we found that they helped our daughter. Our daughter did not like having the aromatherapy, but she certainly liked the dim lighting, and that really helped her. So you can look at these. If you think about the deep breathing, that was huge, and they trained our daughter, and not only that, but the classroom. But they talked about breathing in the flower really deeply and then blowing out the candle. And she'll do that even now, which is really great. When you look down below where it says like earplugs, so a lot of times the noise can be quite overwhelming, and so they had earphones and earplugs always available. Some other examples of accommodations and modification would be something around heavy work. And heavy work engages a sense called proprioception, or body awareness. And heavy work activities can help kids with sensory processing issues feel somewhat centered. So here are some examples: wall push-ups, weighted vests, a beanbag chair, a body sack. That's kind of like, it's a thin material and it goes around the whole body and it looks like a cocoon almost, and they can stretch it out. It's really neat. A trampoline. They have like a small trampoline in our child's classroom that kids could just jump on. Little things like pushing the teacher's rolling chair, maybe a scooter board, pulling a wagon, and lots of fidgets. You can always have a sensory table available in the classroom, like rice or bubble wrap popping. Okay, so another examples of accommodations and modifications, having a great sensory classroom setup would be wonderful to have. And not only does it help our PANS and PANDAS children, but it really honestly helps every single child in that setting, in that classroom. Having flexible seating, what I mean by that is that we don't all have to sit at a table. We don't all have to sit at a desk. We can sit on the floor. We can sit with our legs out and not pretzel style. There's lots of cool chairs out there that kids can bounce on a little bit, and just gives them freedom to move. instead of writing down on a table, maybe there's an elevated writing surface. Some other things, chalkboard writing, stamps, pencil and the Play-Doh, having lots of resistive tools, so they have to, like press on things. A TheraBand on a chair. A TheraBand, it looks like there's two ways that it looks like. It can look like a rope or like a thick band. And a lot of teachers will put that on the bottom at the base of the chair between the two legs, and that the kids can set their feet on it and they can press on it while they're sitting down. Of course, having all of the cool beanbag and rug and pillows and mats just to make kids feel really comfortable. Again, belly breathing. You can have a table with puzzles. Well, oftentimes kids will go back to a puzzle area and just kind of work on that for a couple minutes when they're feeling a little, overwhelmed. And you can read the rest there. Some health-related accommodations and modifications. You can have ice packs available. A lot of times teachers will have a little, refrigerator in the classroom or even at the nurse's station. But a lot of times our daughter would go get a little cute little ice pack, and it was like a ladybug, and she'd put it on her neck because her neck hurt often, or just to cool down from outside because a lot of our pandas and pandas kids are overheated. A separate bathroom or a different time to use the bathroom because sometimes those noises are quite overwhelming. Our teacher and the counselor showed our daughter how to put Post-it notes over the sensor to delay that loud flushing so you're not so shocked by that. Again, promoting and teaching proper hand washing to keep the illnesses down. Any deep cleaning by custodial staff is greatly appreciated. Clorox wipes, kids can use them. That's up for you to decide. Having a water bottle available to drink out of. Of course, a change of clothing. If they get hot, if there's any sort of bathroom accidents. And then what was really helpful is at our school, they notified us every time there was a strep infection within her grade level or like the section of school that she was in. Okay, next up, some accommodations and modifications, really thinking about school staff. Providing education with coping strategies and social filtering skills. The counselors can do a lot of those things to help your child keep and maintain friendships during this time, and they can give them friendship skills. Of course, they can provide any reassurance. Some of our kids really need that. Provides those self-regulation options, which were some of the accommodations and modifications on the other slides. The teachers can have ongoing consultation with an occupational therapist. They can really train your teachers how to help your child in the classroom. Some other ideas would be when there's big assessments, maybe not give those during a flare. Having the staff recognize the decline in math and writing and reading during flares, and that's a normal thing. It certainly seems abnormal, but most kids do that. And let's not grade them during this time, right? Having movement breaks. Something called Me Moves is really cool. It's kind of Tai Chi looking. It's really cool, but it gets kids really in a calm state. And at our school, the kids use that. To educate your school nurse on the symptoms. So your child might be coming saying, my stomach hurts, and they're like thinking they're like sick with the flu. No, it might be anxiety, or with the joint pain and all those other things they may be coming to the school nurse about. Excuse tardiness or absence during flares. Oftentimes, parents with PANS and PANDAS children are late to school because it's a really rough morning, and that's okay. And we want our kids to come to school calm and ready. And so excusing that is fantastic and something to maybe have in your 504 or your IEP. Okay, lastly, things related to consider when you're talking about a 504 and IEP. Counseling, audiology, any medical services, occupational therapy, of course, orientation and mobility services. I know some of our PANS and PANDAS kids are very clumsy, if that's the best word to describe them, and some of those services may help them with that. Of course, parent counseling and training, any physical therapy, school health services, a social worker, and speech and language. And I also want to just add the school nurse director, usually of the whole district, is a great person to go to. They have a lot of helpful information and programs available for parents like us. So I just want to say thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to watch this. I wish you the best of luck for advocating for your child with PANS and PANDAS. If you have any questions or comments, there's my email. Please let me know. And again, this just is a presentation that comes from our experience as parents of a child with PANDAS and going through the IEP and 504 process. Thank you so much for listening.